Is it?
Yeah.
So, 13, we did organization. That's chapter 13. So, 13.1 was organizational architecture, where I introduced the 5 main components of organizational architecture. After that, we went to 13.2, which is organizational structure. And structure itself had 3 components, right? So the first component was centralization, and of course decentralization. The second one was division into units and subunits, what we call horizontal differentiation, with different types of divisions. And the third was integration, the same as integrating mechanisms. Right? We did all that. Last time we began or only reached control 13.3. Control systems. And part of control systems is the first big subsection was types. And within types, we had 4 types. Did I cover last time the 4 types? Let's just write them out. The first type of control is personal control. You actually go, you actually check, you actually see what is happening. The second one is bureaucratic controls, mostly and with budgets, spending, control of money. The third one is output controls, where you have targets and people gotta meet certain targets. You focus on results, right? And number 4, the last type, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Cultural controls. And you may have strong culture, and strong culture affects employees' behavior significantly, and weak culture does not affect people significantly. Within strong culture, one of the key ideas is that of self-control. People in strong culture are very careful, and they usually try to exert self-control. Let's see what else. Up to here, did we cover this last time? Number 2 is incentive systems or incentives. So, what is an incentive? Incentive is a device or mechanism through which you affect desired behavior. So you give them extra benefits, you give them extra salaries, you give them extra bonuses. So these are mostly positive type incentives. These are known in the world of business and common language as the carrot. It's figurative, basically means something that people want to get, and you give it to them for behaving fairly good and well. The alternative to the carrot, known everywhere in the literature, is the stick. Stick, in this particular case, means punishment. Stick is the one where you use to beat people or beat animals. So the carrot is the positive type of incentive, which reinforces good behavior. And the stick is negative type of incentive, which discourages bad or undesired behavior. The carrot which we use, not very juicy one over here, is just grades. If you're learning and studying, we're giving you good grades. The stick, or the negative one, will be attendance. Attendance is, hey, I don't want you to be absent, so keep track of everyone's attendance. You all know that. When we get done, I'll have to take the attendance. So the stick is some sort of a punishment. So positive is the same as reward, and the negative is the same as punishment. As hard as different incentive systems are designed, one thing we know for sure: you can't just work with positive rewards. Without punishment, systems don't work. By the same token, you can't work with punishment only. You need the reward. So a proper incentive system requires that you clearly specify both the positive and the negative. Okay? Otherwise, the system just doesn't work. A lot of distortions appear when you don't have the negative side. Let's see what else we have. So, example here I already gave you is the annual bonus. One simple, easy example. And this annual bonus is associated with meeting specific targets. In other words, for delivering good or proper output. If output is met, you give them an annual bonus. Usually incentives are tied to metrics. We call these performance metrics. As I explained early on during the introduction, when I made 2 lectures ago, control systems will have some sort of, any control system will have some sort of what we call target, which is something that you want to accomplish, the same as a goal or objective, but the goal and objective will somehow be quantified and measured. So in academia we have very, very weak methods of quantifying things, especially quality, but at least we quantify things like, hey, if I can cover in this course in 12 weeks 8 chapters, we are doing okay. Well, I'm doing okay. And if you can learn 8 chapters, you're doing excellent jobs, okay? So, learning 3 or 4 chapters, not good. For example, when I was teaching in a previous university, they were telling me, oh, we emphasize here quality. Quality is the most important thing. And I said, well, how is this relating to covering 4 chapters per semester? We got 15 weeks, and in 15 weeks we cover 4 chapters. And we're dragging on 4 weeks per chapter, okay? And they say, well, we really want to emphasize quality. Our students' capabilities aren't as good and high. And I'm thinking, but covering 4 chapters is a big bad joke, right? Isn't it, right? I mean, we typically cover 15 out of 15, usually, but there we cover only 4 out of 15. So this is a simple example of a simple metric where you just say, hey, how many chapters did you guys learn? Same thing happens with tests and exams and other things. If you're producing or manufacturing, how many pieces you manufacture, how many pieces you produce, and so on. So you have certain targets, then you have certain performance, which I told you the actual result. So the first one is the target, it's your goal. The second one is the actual, hey, what did we actually cover? And you look at the difference, which we call the discrepancy. Is the discrepancy significant or not significant? So the point back is that you design the incentives, you tie them to specific performance metrics, and if the metric is met, certain metric is met, you may have a carrot, like the annual bonus. But at the same time, if the metric is not met, you're going to get some sort of a penalty, okay? Over here, I got visitors, you know, from the Philippines, and working now temporarily here in a local store. They say, hey, you're more than 5 minutes late. I cut half your daily salary. Well, that's one hell of a stick, right? It's a heavy-duty penalty, all right? So, this is an example of simple. Now, in this case, it's not a performance metrics, it's more of a, hey, you didn't do your job or whatever that might be. Same thing, hey, you have to provide a report within 12 hours of your whatever work might be. If you are late, we'll cut a quarter of your salary. It's going to be daily salary because they would like what's called wage earners. Anyway, so incentives, you need something to measure against and provide. And if you don't meet the measurement by a certain percentage, so you will have a difference. It's called tolerance. Let's explain tolerance. Okay, I can do it here. Tolerance is acceptable deviation from the targets. It's, you gotta be at 9 o'clock at work. But if you're 30 seconds late, probably it's not a big problem, right? But being late 20 minutes is considered to be a serious problem, okay? This month, you have to sell, let's say, 26 motorcycles, okay? That's, you're a motorcycle salesman. If you sell 25, that's okay, no big deal. But selling 16, definitely not okay. Our target for this semester to cover is 10 chapters. And if I cover 9, yeah, that's okay, okay? It's within the tolerance. So tolerance for us here is a chapter, maybe 2, okay? But if we have a goal of 11 chapters and we cover 6, you obviously get to understand that 6 is not really acceptable, meaning it doesn't meet the target. But 10 out of 11 is okay, all right? So whenever you have certain performance metrics, you need to understand clearly what's the tolerance, okay? Is the tolerance high or is the tolerance low? And employees in designing a system need to understand clearly what the tolerance is, okay? They need to understand, hey, no more than 5 minutes, okay? As at one point, I had here, not in this class, students coming late, 15, 20, 30, 40 minutes late for class, okay? So the tolerance is 10 minutes. And at minute 10, we lock the door, right? So this is example of a tolerance. Okay, 9 or 10 minutes is okay, but after 10 minutes, no more. So tolerance, any type of incentive and control system has to have a tolerance. Discrepancy is what you actually observe as a deviation. Intolerance is what is acceptable as a deviation. And you compare the actual discrepancy to the tolerance. Okay. Let's see what else I have here. Okay. Part of the incentive systems, number 3 is, and it has to be understood, for me it's easier, for you maybe not so easier, there are cultural differences. Cultural differences. You need to adjust control systems to different cultures. Some cultures don't tolerate a lot of penalties. They don't like the idea of penalties. And sometimes they struggle hard to design incentive systems without penalties, and most of the times they typically fail, because these types of systems without penalties are doomed to fail. But anyway, the tolerance may be different. Cultural tolerance is, hey, 5 minutes, you might be late at one place, but another place, when I was, let's say, in the Middle East, yeah, you could be late 15, 20, 30 minutes for a meeting, that's okay, all right? I mean, there is no need for German precision in the Middle East, and you don't need Japanese type of punctuality in the Middle East. Nobody cares about it. I mean, 5, 10, 15 minutes is like nothing. Time is not valued significantly in the desert. In the desert, they got plenty of time, and during the day, during the heat, culturally, well, physically, at the temperature of 45, you can't do much work anyway. So, you don't just do a lot of work. People take long breaks. They take long afternoon breaks. Almost nobody works between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock. But if you open at 3:15 or 3:30, it's okay. Hey, you opened the store anyway. And who's going to come at 3:15? It's damn hot. It's 50 degrees Celsius, okay? So you need to understand that cultural differences. Typically, foreigners, especially Japanese and sometimes German, they open business somewhere. They try to impose German or Japanese style precision, and the culture just, you tell them they gotta be at work at 7 o'clock, they got 7:10, 7:15. I mean, it's okay anyway, and everyone's doing it. And then they try to impose big penalties, and sometimes it doesn't work. So cultural differences are usually necessary to adjust the incentives, okay? And in general, to adjust the control systems, okay? And you also need to understand that a lot of times the incentive systems will as I've been explaining, in the world of economics in general and in human behavior, will have unintended consequences. And one of the unintended consequences is that whatever the metric is, usually people in the system, those that are being controlled, will design and change their modification just to meet the metric without really caring about the underlying goals and the underlying objectives. A simple example which we see in students is they prepare for the exam only on the night before or the morning on the day of the exam. And if you're preparing right before the exam, two things happen. Your performance during the exam is very high, but your learning is extremely low. Because if you prepare only one time right before the exam, you're going to score well on the exam, and then you simply forget almost everything, right? It happens all the time. So, whatever it is, if we're trying to have unemployment and we're trying to keep unemployment within 6%, and that's the government's goal, a lot of people will change their behavior and the registration and all the other things to the point where they're going to get back to the desired metric. So the problem is that one of the unintended consequences changes behavior so pervertly, so distorts the behavior to the point where everything is about hitting the metric and people stop caring about anything else. They stop thinking about why they're there, what they're doing there, and all the other things. The example which we have in many schools and universities is students get focused on the grade A, they just want to get the top grade, and they don't really care about anything else, like actually learning, like actually understanding, like actually keeping the knowledge, like realizing that they may need it later on in life, and other things, especially if you got introductory accounting, then intermediate accounting, then advanced accounting, or introductory finance, intermediate finance, or advanced finance, or for doctors, they all begin with basic anatomy and physiology, and then they go through the different diseases. But if you just learn and cram for the exams, as most doctors do, meaning medical students do before they become doctors, later on, next semester, they don't remember anything, okay? Big problem. So, this is a major problem in general, in life, in business, okay? Let's see what else. Incentive systems. All right, so the next subsection within incentive systems is, again, control systems. So, controls, incentives, and strategy. So far all I did was I discussed the types of control systems, then I discussed the basics of incentives and variations. Now we need to see how controls and incentive systems are, relate to strategy. In other words, the way I was explaining from the basic strategic or strategy paradigm was, whatever the strategy is, the strategy will affect the overall organizational architecture. And strategy will affect the control systems, and it will affect the incentive systems. So, the concept here is known, let me see if I'm going to put in here, is known as performance ambiguity. Page 497. Performance ambiguity exists when the performance cannot be traced directly to the unit's action. In other words, when your input does not directly affect your output. Better way to say it is that your output does not depend entirely on your own input, but it depends on other people's input. Okay? So, whatever you do is affected by other people. So, you may be a great salesman trying to sell these cars, but if your marketing is pretty bad, and they didn't advertise and didn't do all those other things, you could be the greatest salesman in the world, you won't be doing a good job unless marketing is helping you and supporting you, okay? By the same token, you may be trying to sell some cars which are poorly designed with a lot of problems, technicals, and you might be again a great salesman, but at the same time, if the car is just a bad car, unreliable, and customers know it, they aren't going to be coming to buy it. So, trying to sell a bad car, it's going to be a damn hard job, okay? So, your job as a salesman is affected by the quality of the product, is affected by marketing, is affected by things like marketing pricing. Is it expensive or not so expensive, okay? So here, your salesmanship is affected significantly by other factors, okay? Other factors might be you trying to sell your BMW, you're a BMW salesman, but Mercedes has a 10% discount for whatever reason and is seriously undercutting your efforts as a competitor. So, again, you might be doing a lot of things, but it doesn't depend on you. It depends on your marketing department, engineering department, and even on the pricing of your competitor. In this particular case, you got performance ambiguity. And performance ambiguity affects seriously how you design the incentive system and how you design the control system, because it's very easy to say, hey, you gotta sell 12 cars this month, and if you sell only 8, they can say it's your fault because you're a bad salesman. And sometimes it wasn't your fault. It wasn't because you were a bad salesman. Sometimes the reasons were completely unrelated to you. It wasn't your fault anyway. So, performance ambiguity introduces basic uncertainty. And is an indicator, or let me try to do, I'm going to use now the opposite arrow, and is usually caused by interdependence. 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 Sales depends on marketing, and sales depends on engineering. But at the same time, engineers depend also on sales and marketing. Maybe not as much, but they do depend on those. So you have interdependence between different units, between different departments. Okay? And interdependence causes performance ambiguity, and performance ambiguity causes or creates or increases uncertainty. Okay, now let me see. So, what is this? All this means? It means that in global companies, if you're a global company, the more global you are, and as I was explaining in the previous lectures, the more complex your business strategy is, the higher the performance ambiguity. So, a different way of rephrasing it is that global companies or international companies, global companies, increase performance ambiguities. Suddenly, you depend on the market in Japan. Suddenly, you depend on the market in Russia. For the case of BMW, it depends on the market in
Germany?
No. China, not Germany, China. The German market is amazingly stable. You can do miracles and you can't increase sales by 10%. It's not going to happen, right? In other words, you can do whatever you want to do. The German market isn't going to change much. But the Chinese market could change a lot. A little better advertising campaign, okay, in Chinese and with the cultural things and other stuff could increase rapidly sales as it has been, and 80% of BMW's growth in sales and profitability is driven by the Chinese. And in general, Asian markets, Chinese is the main driver, but of course you sell a lot. If you went to Singapore, right, you see a lot of BMWs over there. If you go to Hong Kong, you see a lot of BMWs over there. So it's driven mostly by, again, Asia and China. And the ultra-rich Chinese, or the middle class, is getting relatively wealthy, drives the bulk of profits and profitability. So for a global company, even a simple opening of Europe and introducing countries like my home country, Bulgaria and Romania, can drive more BMW profitabilities than the German market. Because suddenly you introduce a country like Bulgaria, which is hungry to get all of these cars, okay? And people would be buying them, okay? So again, we got a lot of Bulgarians, just like me, who worked somewhere in a foreign country. They made the money in a foreign country, they bring the money in, and we buy a BMW, right? Right? So, again, the idea is that global companies a lot of times are a lot more affected by the foreign market, and therefore they are a lot more dependent on the foreign subsidiaries or the foreign sales or the foreign marketing or the foreign growth or the foreign distribution systems, and this introduces significant amount of performance ambiguity and uncertainty. So now what could hurt most BMW today will be a crashing Chinese economy, okay? Will be. Again, so that's the way to begin to think about it. To think in terms of stable markets and markets that could rapidly grow and later on rapidly crash, like the Brazilian market did, okay? All right, let's see what else we got here. The highest will be in, as I was explaining before, and I wrote, let me just write it out, highest is in transnational. In transnational companies pursuing transnational strategy, as if you would remember, as I was explaining before, transnational strategy is the hardest. It's the most difficult one. It has the highest demands on management. It requires two-way transfer of skills, of knowledge, and of everything else. And one of the reasons for doing this is not that you're simply working in a harsh economic environment where you gotta both localize, you got localization pressures and you got cost pressures, but what makes it damn hard is exactly the increase or the high level of performance ambiguity, the high level of interdependence, and the high level of uncertainty. You're constantly working in an uncertain, rapidly changing environment where your job begins on a lot of other people in a lot of other countries over which you have practically zero control. Like, what's the Chinese Communist Party going to decide about taxing these luxury BMWs because of whatever reasons might be, okay? So you are here at the whim of the Chinese government deciding to impose a heavy tax on them, okay? This is a simple example. So you are too dependent on other people, other markets, other competitors, and so on. All right, let's see what else we got. All right, next little subsection over here is that controls have costs, as in costs of control. In other words, to have a control system is not free. To have a control system costs money. Control involves some sort of monitoring. You got to be looking at these people. So someone's got to be watching them, okay? Someone, if people aren't coming right on time, someone's got to be checking. They got to swipe their card when they come in. They got to swipe their card when they go out. A simple example of a control system is wasting 5 minutes of class time before class or after class to check to see your attendance. Now, that's all right. But wasting in accounting 10 minutes to check if you have your homework, right? Do you have your homework? You have problem 1, problem 2, right? So going over each one and checking, okay, you have, you don't have, why, all those things. So any type of control system has costs. It always has costs. It is an illusion that a control system can be designed to be free, all right? Someone would be wasting their time. Someone would be wasting their effort, okay? Someone could use their time and effort for more productive purposes. But of course, control systems have sometimes direct costs, like imposing and putting in a little camera over there just to see who's coming in, who's going out. A simple control system is being afraid someone might just steal the monitor, okay? I'm not saying it's happening, but if you're going to have a control system to preserve the property, you want to make sure, that at least you got at the entrance a camera that will capture everybody who's walking in with a monitor in hand, okay, with some property in general. So any type of control system will have the costs both of money and time. Okay? And sometimes managers are fooled into thinking that just bad management, that, Oh, it doesn't cost you any money. That's true, but it still costs time. And time could be used for more, better, productive purposes. When you lose time, which you could use for other things, we have a special term in economics. It's called opportunity cost. Oh yeah, you know? You just studied it in economics? Yeah? Okay. So now you get to see how your economics lecture helps you a little bit with management, a lot with finance, a lot, of course, with banking. They are interrelated. Do you remember what opportunity cost is? How it's defined? How is it defined?
The cost of the next best alternative.
Oh, the cost of the next best alternative. So if I'm not going to be doing for 10 minutes these homeworks, what could I how could I best use my time alternatively? All right? How could I best put in my time alternatively? Okay? So what's the next best thing that I can do with my time or money? In general, with any type of resource. The resource could be internet connection, the resource could be piece of paper, the resource could be any kind of economic or financial resource. All right, let's see what else we have. And performance ambiguity, because of the uncertainty, causes various problems and complications. Problems and complications, and therefore solving these problems and solving these complications is costly and increases the cost of control. So, international and global companies will typically have higher overall costs of controls due to the higher performance ambiguity and the higher general need for control. All right, now we got this thing, which is the following. I'll try to summarize that little table over here in a simple way. The cost is lowest, cost of control is lowest for localization strategy. Localization strategy, the cost of control is fairly low. Next one, cost of control increases to, let's call it moderate for international strategy. So, if you're a local company, you have certain costs of control. If you have localization strategy, your costs of control increase somewhat, little. If you have international company and strategy, your costs of control increase moderately. Low, I designate with one simple arrow, right? Moderately, I designate with two arrows. If you have a global, let's make sure that I get this right. Global strategy, your costs of control are high. And I'll designate it with three arrows, right? And as I was explaining in here, the highest ambiguity, complexity, and all the other stuff is in transnational strategy. And now you're smart enough, right? We're designated with 4 arrows. Squeaking, right? Okay, let me see what else I have so I can get done. Okay, let me just take one last. So, 2 or 3 final notes is number 1. No matter what the strategy is for an international company, no matter which of the strategies is using, the main dominant controls types are output and bureaucratic. So, global companies will always heavily rely on output types of control and bureaucratic, which for small companies are minimal, okay? So, as companies grow larger and more international, you will be having more, meaning you will be relying more and more heavily on bureaucratic types of control and output types of control. And here is the other key, which they say a lot of times, for a global international company, the key to success is being able to develop and implement a cultural type of control. If you're able to develop and implement a cultural type of control, in other words, on this one will depend critically the success. Example is Honda, because I'm familiar with Honda, will have a manufacturing plant in Columbus, Ohio. I did get my PhD at the Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio, and I had quite a few friends, especially Bulgarian friends, immigrants, who would get a job at the Honda plant in Columbus, Ohio. So I get to hear a lot of their stories. And the hardest and difficult part, which the Japanese are saying, is they're trying to create a Japanese style plant, manufacturing plant in the US, and they are trying to implement of course they got the bureaucratic and output control, but they're trying to change the culture and mentality of American workers to fit the Japanese type of manufacturing and other control systems. So in this particular case, they were fairly successful, and one way to be successful was by internationalizing their labor force. In other words, instead of fighting strong American worker culture, they dilute it. They get in Mexicans when they can, and the Mexicans very happy to work for Honda. They get a Bulgarian whenever they can, and the Bulgarians very happy and proud to work for Honda, because Honda provides good benefits, good job, good time. They're not going to screw around with your time. You work, let's say, 9 to 5 or whatever your shift time is. They're not going to be asking you for work 20 minutes more or 2 hours more. They're going to be paying you what you do. So they're going to, in other words, working for Japanese makes people very happy and very proud, okay? And they are very eager to adopt the Japanese ways of doing work so that they can get the benefits of the Japanese employer. So they say, oh yeah, Honda is way better employer, let's say Japanese employer, I'm talking about Columbus, Ohio in the United States, than the typical American employer. And a lot of people would prefer to work for Honda. So they will eagerly change their work ethics, behavior, and they will eagerly adopt to the culture. But if you got 100 Americans and one foreigner, Americans will dominate the culture. But if you dilute the Americans to 50, 60, or 70%, and you got a lot of foreigners, the foreigners will impose and introduce part of the culture. Anyway, the point is that if you're going to be pursuing some sort of internationalization or globalization, culture is, and developing the cultural control is critical to success. Good enough? 10 minutes.